Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 3 Point Weekly. Today, we'll be grading every Western Conference team's offseason up to this point. So be sure to leave your thoughts on each team's offseason down below in the comments. But we're going to get right into it, starting off with the number one seed from last year's Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns. We'll start off with you.
Hey, getting into this, I think I'm gonna have to give this one probably like a C minus. I'm not really a big fan. Didn't really bring in anybody that impactful. You still have the big DeAndre Ayton thing going on, so it's like keeping it simple. Really, just not great. But when you're already such a good team, it's like how much moves can you really make?
D plus. You lost JaVale McGee. Ayton still is not signed. I don't even know. Like we was just talking before we hit record. Don't even know what that situation looks like. And then like your big signings is like Damian Lee, Josh Okogie. I hate it. They did re-sign Bismack, which was cool. They gave Book his max extension, but going into next season, already the way their year ended was just like a disappointment. But now I'm a lot less confident in this team. Chris Paul is going to be a year older. And they didn't really address any of the needs that was really their downfall. So right now it's a D plus. We'll see if KD ends up there, but it's not impressive so far.
Yeah, I'll give them a C minus for now. But as mentioned by you guys, like it's really just going to be dependent on what happens with DeAndre Ayton, whether he does resign or if he does leave, what the return ends up being for him. Because as you mentioned, Tyrik, the needs for this team haven't really been addressed yet. You lost one of the best backup centers in the league in JaVale McGee. Biyombo can do the job fine. But there's definitely still some concerns with this group. And of course, you have arguably the biggest free agent left on the board in DeAndre Ayton that still has to be dealt with. And however that ends up folding will change a lot moving forward. Moving on to the Memphis Grizzlies, one of the more surprising teams in a positive manner last year. Haven't necessarily stayed quiet this summer. And we'll get your thoughts on that, Tyrik.
I'm gonna give it a B for right now. They did trade away DeAnthony Melton, which was not a head scratcher, but because I'm done judging what they do when they trade guys after they get their value up, because they always seem to develop somebody. Like probably Zaire Williams is gonna come back and be like a really good player next year. So I'm not gonna doubt that move. I think their draft picks, I never doubt their draft because they always hit in the draft. So I'm gonna give it a B. I'm excited to see like Laravia, David Roddy on the court this season. And even Kennedy Chandler, they're kind of raving about him. He got his contract. I think he signed that the other day. So I'm going to give them a B because really good draft. And they just, made necessary moves to get better. And just, like you mentioned, a very successful team last season. I expect them to be maybe not just as good, but they're going to be more experienced this year. And they're going to be a threat in the Western Conference.
Hey, this team got Kenny Lofton. I think they might have won the offseason. I'm going to be honest. Watching the summer league games, he's just one of those guys that's like you just love to see it. I don't know, but in all seriousness, like I'm really high on DeAnthony Melton, but just for like money reasons, it's like you're gonna have to pay him eventually. So I guess they were kind of choosing what players they want to keep and who they're more willing to move off of. So I mean, I don't love to see it, but bringing in Danny Green, I mean, that can be something, nice little veteran presence for a team that a lot of people criticize as being too young. So ups and downs, I'd probably give it a B as well, I think.
Yeah, I'd probably give it a B as well. On the note of Danny Green, I don't even know if he'll play, given that serious injury he picked up later on in the playoffs. So he might. I expect he was mainly just here as a salary filler and the pick being attached onto it, which ended up being pick 23. Whether he's back on the later part of the season, he could prove to be valuable later on, but he won't be playing anytime soon. As far as the DeAnthony Melton move, I have no problems with it, given the fact they had so much depth at the guard position. Tyus Jones ended up being re-signed, which then made more sense as to why DeAnthony Melton got moved, and John Conchar got re-signed to an extension for the next 3 years as well. So they locked up their backcourt with Tyus Jones and Conchar off the bench, so it made DeAnthony Melton a little bit less necessary to this team. They still have very good depth in their backcourt. They locked up Ja long-term, and as you mentioned, Tyrik, they had four draft selections, and Memphis has seemed to be able to draft well. So anytime they can add that much more young talent, Kenny Lofton playing well via Summer League as well. So it looks like they're continuing to take steps in the right direction moving forward. They lost Kyle Anderson as well via free agency, but as mentioned, Zaire Williams will likely be looking to take another step forward and fill a bigger role. So I like what they've done. I think they haven't made that big move that some people might have thought after having such a successful season, but I think keeping that level of continuity and keeping that group together is a good way to go about it. Moving on to the NBA title champions, the Golden State Warriors have had a few key bench players leave this summer. I'll get your thoughts first on it from you, Gabe.
All right, if I'm taking this, it's a little, it's got its ups and its downs. I think Dante DiVincenzo has the potential to be more impactful than anybody that they're losing. However, I think a big thing that really carried this team and a big reason as to why they won the title was because of their depth. And losing a fair amount of that, while JTA and Damian Lee might not have played the most this season, it's like still two guys that have been on the team for a minute and kind of well-liked in the locker room and just a part of the team chemistry and kind of team aspect. Gary Payton, just a super hard-nosed player, and Otto Porter, who honestly maybe was more one of the unsung players on the team. I think he had quite a bit to do in that finals. He had some good moments. So I don't know, man. I think it really might be getting a C- for me. I don't know if they really got better. Do I think they'll still be fine and still be able to compete for a title next year? Absolutely. But it's like, did you get better? Probably not. So I'll go C-.
You said C-?
Yes.
Oh, I was going to give him a B- because I think Gary Payton was kind of a decent sized loss. You mentioned Otto Porter. I think that was a pretty impactful guy, but I think the rookies they had last year, I think they're going to step up in a big way. Moses Moody, I know it's summer league, but he's killing. And even when him and Kuminga got minutes last year, they look really good. So that's how I'm looking at it for them. I'm looking at this offseason as a gateway for them to get those guys minutes because they just couldn't find consistent minutes. I think they're going to be ready to produce. And they had two solid draft picks, like I think low risk type of moves. Like you got Patrick Baldwin Jr. late in the first round. Ryan Rollins was a big time scorer at the MAC level at Toledo. So I think they did a good job. You lost like JTA, who didn't really play. Damian Lee didn't really play. Otto Porter and Gary Payton, those might be losses, but I think they can be supplemented with Kuminga, with Moody, and potentially, James Wiseman can come back and give them something too. So I will give it a B-. They didn't make, and you mentioned the DiVincenzo move. That's another low risk type move, which could pay off big time in the end.
Yeah, I agree with that standpoint of they have the players that are ready to come in, and with the standpoint of Kuminga, with Moses Moody, they are ready to come in and fill some of those roles. But ultimately, from purely a face value of what occurred this offseason, from who's coming in, who's coming out, I'm probably leaning towards more of a C- as well. But I don't think it's going to necessarily hurt them too much on the court moving forward. I think their depth is still going to be quite good. I think Kuminga is set for a very good season next year. I really liked what I saw from him last year. And as you mentioned, Tyrik, Moses Moody has been playing very well throughout Summer League, and it looks like he's ready to get a bit more of a regular spot on the rotation. But ultimately, the Gary Payton losses and Otto Porter losses are going to be significant. They are going to have to make those adjustments. I think they will make those adjustments. But from an on-court perspective, from rotations, from a locker room perspective, it seemed as though many people within the Warriors organization were surprised that Gary Payton did not return. So there's certainly some adjustments that have to be made. From a face value of the offseason, I'm a bit more on a C- perspective. I'm not that high on it, but I think they'll be able to replace that depth on the court moving into next season.
Yeah, if you consider those like internal improvements, I do think it's like probably just a net positive, at least a net neutral, just because, especially you even mentioned the James Wiseman, like him not playing at all, being a number 2 overall pick and then winning a title. Like that's a pretty big deal. Because then if you have him and you just re-sign Kevon Looney, it's like this whole dynasty, this whole 8-year thing, their biggest weakness has always been the center spot. And it's like if Wiseman can come in and really be a solid piece, you've got like 2 centers that are like solid, really impact players. So they can really get better. If we're just looking at the free agency moves, though, I do think it's a negative.
Makes sense. Definitely does.
Moving on to the Dallas Mavericks, who started off with one of the bigger trades before the draft and have made some very good low risk but smart moves that have certainly got the NBA talking throughout free agency and through Summer League. I'll get your thoughts first on it, Tyrik.
Man, I'm I'm gonna give it an A. Almost wanted to say A plus because I really like this offseason, man. First, the Christian Wood trade was good, but then to get JaVale McGee, so now Wood probably won't have to play the 5 like as much. I love it. And then Jaden Hardy in the second round, a first round type talent, and he fell all the way to pick 37. Another low risk type of move. They had a great offseason, man. That's an A for me.
Yeah, honestly, I think they did pretty well. It's like with the whole Jalen Brunson situation, I don't know if they wanted to give him that much money. So like the fact that they didn't kind of try and woo him back with matching what the Knicks had, it's like, okay, that's fine. But overall, like Tyrik said, it's like bringing in JaVale, bringing in Christian Wood, really solidifying that front court when you have Luka who can almost single-handedly carry the backcourt by himself. I like it.
Yeah, I think that Jalen Brunson loss is the only thing for me that keeps me from calling this an A+ offseason. I'd still give it an A, though. Their biggest need was at the center position, as far as I'm concerned. They had some fine guys there, but Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber just aren't quite the caliber you need when it gets into the depths of the postseason, and you start matching up against some good teams that you need that better rim protection or you need that better offensive production. And they got a bit of both with Christian Wood and JaVale McGee. The JaVale McGee signing, brilliant move. I didn't really know where he was going to go, but I think he fits the needs of Dallas very well from a rim protection standpoint, from a rebounding standpoint. We've already talked about the Christian Wood trade at large as well. I think that was a brilliant move. It was low risk. And Jaden Hardy at pick 37, that's already looking like a pretty darn good selection. So I think Dallas have absolutely smashed this offseason. Obviously, losing Brunson hurts, but you have Spencer Dinwiddie in there now, so it's not like you have no one else from a perimeter creation standpoint.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. You still got Dinwiddie, who I think he can be good enough. And then you're also getting Tim Hardaway Jr. back, who didn't play like the majority of last season. So you're getting guys back. I think they'll be able to supplement the loss of Brunson. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they got enough there to move on quite fine without it. Moving on to the Utah Jazz, members of one of the biggest, if not the biggest trade of the offseason, and still potentially one looming. But we'll start off with your thoughts, Gabe, on the offseason so far of the Utah Jazz.
This is one of the hardest ones to grade, I think, just because it's just so hard to kind of gauge what they're doing. And we definitely talked a lot about this team last episode, and it's just a lot of like so many different angles to look at it. I think overall, I'm probably going to have to just go right down the middle right now and just give them a C, simply because you did get a big return for Gobert, but because you're keeping Donovan Mitchell around, I don't really know what you're trying to do. Are you trying to compete or are you trying to rebuild? Because if you're going in a rebuilding direction, this is like a lot of really good things. But if you're trying to still compete, then it's like, okay, we might need to change around some of this and do a little bit of retooling beyond just bringing in all the talent they did and all the picks. It's just like, if you're building around Don, it's not complete. And if you're rebuilding, why is he still there? So because I can't really gauge it, I'm just going down the middle.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same grade. I want to see the full reset. So, yeah, that Gabe pretty much just said everything that there is to say. It's just a weird situation right now. It might be a little incomplete at the same time. Maybe Donovan Mitchell gets moved a little down the line, but I think a C is like the only grade you can actually give this right now.
Yeah, like you guys mentioned, I mean, it's fully just dependent on what does or doesn't happen with Donovan Mitchell throughout the remainder of the offseason. I'll give them a B- solely on the fact of I did not expect them to get such a big haul for Rudy Gobert, and the fact they got that much significant value back is very impressive and very important for them moving forward, especially if they do decide to go in the direction of a rebuild. If they decide to compete, I'm a little bit confused, and this becomes less than a B- to say the least. But it's ultimately just going to be dependent on what they do with Donovan Mitchell. We're still very early into the offseason, so we still could see that change. But they got very, very good return from Rudy Gobert. And the fact that we haven't seen them make any other moves that tends to point me in the direction of competing, the fact that they traded away Royce O'Neal, the fact that there still isn't a center on the roster does indicate to me that they are still very much looking at trading Donovan Mitchell. Now, whether that rings true, I don't know. Maybe they're just making conflicting moves, but based on the return of Rudy Gobert. I would expect Donovan Mitchell does get traded, and at this point in time, I'll give them a B-, but it really just does depend. Similar to Phoenix with DeAndre Ayton for Utah, it just depends what happens with Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I would say Danny Ainge definitely has like I'm sure he definitely has like a plan in mind of what he exactly wants to do with this team moving forward. Like we could be saying all this and Donovan Mitchell might get traded tomorrow. Like that's just how Danny Ainge works sometimes.
Yeah, no, 100%. Moving on to the Denver Nuggets, a team that will hopefully finally be back healthy next year with Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray returning from significant injuries and have been busy themselves this offseason. We'll get your thoughts first from you, Gabe.
You know, the Nuggets, I'm not really sure how I feel yet. I think KCP and Bruce Brown can really kind of beef up their wings a little bit with Jamal Murray coming back. But it's like the players they lost, like Monte, Will Barton, JaMychal Green, I feel like they were all like rotational kind of impact guys. And so they did lose some, they did gain some. I don't really know if they moved in either direction. But I think if you kind of want to take the angle you took from like where Tyrik was talking about the Warriors, where it's like internal improvements, like a James Wiseman coming back for them, the fact that this team has Jamal Murray and Michael Porter coming back, and they've locked up Nikola Jokic for 5 more seasons, pretty much granting them, long-term relevancy at this point. I'd probably have to give them probably a B to B+. I'd probably go B+, just because of how impactful the players coming back are.
Is Ish Smith on their roster?
He is currently on their roster, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm teetering between like a C+ and a B-. I'm gonna give it a C+ because they signed DeAndre Jordan. I don't like that.
Keep a job. He keeps a job.
Y'all know how I feel about DJ at this stage in his career. Man. I don't like that. The Bruce Brown signing though, I think that was excellent. KCP is gonna be a big help for them. But then Monte Morris, when he's a backup point guard, probably the best in the league, or he's at least top 2, top 3. Like he's one of the best backup point guards in the world, and he's going to be put back into that position. Maybe Ish Smith can be just decent enough. I don't know. That's the only thing that's kind of conflicting for me. And then DeAndre Jordan, I don't like that. I'm surprised they didn't bring Boogie back because he was so good for them last season when he just got a little bit of minutes. But I'm going to give it a C+ for right now. Obviously, getting Jamal back healthy and Michael Porter, hopefully, is like a lot of additions. But based on the offseason, I'm going to give it a C+.
I'm going with a B+ for Denver currently. Monte Morris is a significant loss, but I do think a big part of that was what they just wanted to open up more minutes for Bones Highland. I think he'll take a bigger role in that backup point guard spot. And although Austin Rivers hasn't been re-signed yet, I still expect he will return to Denver. That's been the communicated expectation over the course of the last couple of months, and I would expect he ends up returning, and that ends up becoming their main guard rotation off the bench, with Ish Smith being more of a supplementary piece. But I really, really like the additions of KCP and Bruce Brown for this team, and that's why I'm so high on their offseason. One of the biggest concerns that I still had about this Denver team was their defense, specifically on the wing. Aaron Gordon, we know, is good, but after that, it was lacking. And I think KCP is a very good addition. He gives some good three-point shooting, but also some great defense. And Bruce Brown just does a little bit of everything for you. He can screen, he can be a roller, he can be on the ball a bit, he can play make a bit. He's a good passer. He can compete well in the defensive end. He's just one of those winning players that you like to have around, whatever his role ends up being, whatever position he ends up playing. DeAndre Jordan is a concern. Their backup center position is something they need to address because, as far as I'm concerned, he shouldn't be getting regular rotational minutes in the NBA anymore. But ultimately, I think they addressed one of their bigger needs with KCP and Bruce Brown, and they locked up Nikola Jokic for another 5 years. So all in all, I think it's a fairly successful offseason for them. But they do need to figure out their backup center position because DeAndre Jordan should not be playing 10 to 15 minutes a night for you, as far as I'm concerned.
0. He should be playing 0.
Well, he should be. It's what he should be playing.
They was playing Paul Reed over him in the playoffs. Like, no disrespect to Paul Reed. He was actually playing decent.
Man, Paul is like that.
Like, you're that bad. Then they was playing, I think, Millsap at the small ball 5 in the backup lineup. Like, oh my God.
B-ball Paul.
I was gonna ask them, what do y'all think the ideal starting 5 for the Nuggets is, or maybe just their best 5 on the court? They got options. They definitely got options.
I'd probably say KCP at the 2 with Jamal, and then MPJ, Aaron Gordon, and Jokic.
Okay.
I can probably roll with that. I think
I was probably thinking that too. Yeah.
Have Bruce Brown be your guy off the bench. Bones Highland can be your main guard off the bench.
I don't know if it's like a last minute we need a stop type lineup though. Then you throw in Bruce Brown.
Yeah,
Take MPJ out. Yeah.
yeah. You'll probably see some offense defense rotations like that for sure.
They got to show me something if they're going to be healthy, because a lot of people's mindsets, mine included, is if they're healthy, they're a championship team. But I got to see it on the court. I got to see it on the court, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I think that team fully healthy. I think they're better than last year's Mavericks squad, who made the conference finals. They're better than like a Portland team that made the conference finals in this conference 2 years ago. They're better than a lot of teams that have made conference finals pushes in this conference. So it's like, will they get all the way over the humps of the finals? I don't know, but can they at least make it back to the conference finals where they were? Was it 2020?
Yeah, the bubble.
The bubble, yeah. So can they get back to there at least? I definitely believe so.
I think so. I want to see it, man, because I'm a big fan. I actually like what the Nuggets have done over the years. Big Jokic guy. I love Jamal Murray's game. Just got to be healthy, man. That's the only thing.
Jamal, to me, his 50-point game with 0 free throws is one of the most impressive scoring games of the last probably 5 to 10 years.
That's some 2K stuff, bro.
Because most of the time when you see 50, 60-point games, stuff like that, it's usually 15 free throws plus. And it's for him to do all that, just getting straight buckets is that's incredible.
The bubble is so conflicting because you see guys like TJ Warren just turn into Black Jesus, but then it's you do see good players elevate to greatness, and that's what Jamal Murray did. But we just haven't seen that. He's always been somebody in the regular season very inconsistent. He has all-star talent, but he probably won't make multiple all-star games because he's always banged up and stuff. So I don't know. I want to see a full season of him just relatively healthy and see how good he can be, because his talent is off the charts.
Nobody I would trust more at the clutch free throw. Nobody. I'm telling you. I remember just the story came out where it's I swear it was he had to make a ridiculous amount in a row or something before he was allowed to leave.
That's how it should be. Take notes.
Facts. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's like you guys said. It's all about their health. The other thing I need to see from them too is improvement in their defense, and that's why I like the Bruce Brown and KCP additions, because they've typically been a top half defensive team in the regular season, but that does not translate to the playoffs. And obviously, Jokic has improved a lot since then, but there's still other concerns with their defense. Michael Porter Jr. needs to make strides on that end. So if they can become a top half playoff defensive team, I think that's the biggest hurdle as well, alongside being healthy, because everyone knows their offense is elite, but the defense needs to at least be good enough to supplement it, because I don't think their offense is good enough to carry them without having at least an average to slightly above average defense. I don't think anybody's offense really is in the league right now, especially come the playoffs.
Yeah, I think we've seen it's the best of the best can kind of get them to the past 2 years in a row now. The team they fell to was the team that came out of the Western Conference. So actually 3 years in a row, because they made the conference finals the year before. So it's 3 years in a row at least. The team that they lost to is the team that came out. So they're really good against a lot of teams, but just that extra push to get over the best of the best would be something to see.
Definitely. That's 6 minutes of Nuggets talk right there.
Moving on to the New Orleans Pelicans, one of the most exciting teams heading into the next season. We'll start off with your thoughts, Tyrik.
This team can do no wrong. They can't do no wrong lines. I'm gonna just give them an A-. They didn't make any signings, literally none. I think the draft was fine. I like Dyson Daniels a lot. They got EJ Liddell all the way in the second round, which is crazy. And they re-signed Zion, which I'm so glad they did, because people just have it so confused. Because he had one season where he didn't play at all. I think his rookie year he played maybe half of the games played. And then his second season, he was an all-star averaging 27 on 60% shooting. People just got to confuse, man. He's going to be fine. I think he's going to be healthy. So, yeah, I'm going to give him an A- just because everything is about Zion getting back and just seeing what this team at full strength can do.
I would probably have to agree. I think this team is like, no matter what they really did, you can't really, you didn't really have that many significant needs, and so it's like you just acquired some more talent and get healthy, and you come back, and it's just, it was really hard to mess it up, I think, and so they didn't. I really like the place they're at going into next year. And these videos are, I know the social media videos can be misleading sometimes, but I just saw a video this morning of him doing like a 360 windmill out of a walk. Like he just walked into it, like no run, no like preparation. He just walked towards the rim and just he's a specimen, bro. I don't like if he is on the court and he plays like if he can play 65 games, this team could be like a 5 seed. And so
Legit.
this team, just off internal improvements, the couple picks they did have, and just Zion coming back, A-, man. I'll do it. I'll throw it out there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'm giving them an A- as well. I mean, considering the fact that less than 6 months ago, there was talks of Zion leaving, Zion not re-signing, Zion getting traded, talks of if Zion doesn't re-sign, does the Pelicans franchise get relocated? Like some of it was a little bit overblown, but there was also genuine concerns that Zion would not re-sign with New Orleans. And so the fact that he's locked up for the next 5 years now, given the circumstances that were presented not too long ago, is a significant win for the Pelicans. And their draft looks quite good as well, with Dyson Daniels and EJ Liddell getting him as late as they did. So I think all in all, nothing significant from an internal addition standpoint. No one's being added via free agency here, but the decisions they did make were significant, and having Zion back for the next 5 years is definitely going to prove well alongside Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum next season. Moving on to the LA Clippers, a team that will again be, as previously mentioned, with the Denver Nuggets, a team that is going to have a key player back from injury in Kawhi Leonard and will look to move back up the Western Conference standings. We'll get your thoughts first from you, Gabe.
I just need health. Just need health. That's all. Especially bringing in John Wall, kind of his probably last chance. If we're being honest, it's like if he doesn't do well here, his career is probably over. So he has a lot to prove. It's like I think if he really even cares to prove that he's still got it, then he has something to prove. But he could also be like, yeah, I had a stretch of dominance, made millions on millions. It doesn't really matter, but if he wants to and he feels like he needs to, he could have something to prove from that perspective. I think just Kawhi staying healthy, being on the floor at all for them this season. Paul George, he missed like the middle half basically of last year. It's just stay healthy, and that's really the biggest thing for them. Not really a ton of roster moves overall. Losing Hartenstein isn't the greatest, but like getting Kawhi Leonard back on your roster is way bigger than that at the end of the day. So I don't know, man. They're hard to grade because it really is just get your guys back and stay healthy. But if they come back and they actually play, then it's like at least a B because you get Kawhi Leonard back on your roster.
Yeah, I was gonna say a B too. I mean, we'll see how the John Wall move works. I'm hopeful that it'll be at least okay. I think it will be. And either way, he's on a small contract, so you know if it's a disaster, you could probably move off of him. You did mention the Hartenstein. That's a tough loss, but they re-signed Batum. They got Zubac back on a really I think a steal of a deal, like only $11 million a year, which is kind of crazy because he's so productive. Mir Coffey was good for them too. Got him on a cheap deal. Like you said, Gabe, it's really just about them staying healthy. They're another team that just has to be healthy so we can see what the real ceiling of this team is because, you know, it's always hypothetical. Like, man, if they're healthy, they're one of the best teams in the league. But we haven't seen that health for basically 2 of their 3 seasons together, you know, Kawhi and Paul George. So hopefully they can stay healthy. Maybe get a backup big in there to supplement the loss of Hartenstein. But I would give it about a B, you know, with upside to move up depending on how good John Wall is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm probably giving them a B as well. As you mentioned, the only addition they really have to make is they've another backup big, someone like Tristan Thompson. That could be something that they look at. They don't need anyone significant. Zubac is still going to be the primary guy, and re-signing him at the deal they did was quite valuable. They also brought back Batum, who's a very valuable member of this group. So they kept the surrounding core around, which is good to see. as you guys mentioned, it's really all just about health. Moving on to the other team in LA, the Lakers, who had to have a busy offseason themselves after a fairly disastrous season, but we have still not seen any move of Russell Westbrook if he does end up getting moved, as he has opted into his player option for one more year in LA alongside LeBron and AD. I'll get your thoughts first from me, Tyrik.
Okay, just judging it off of like right now, obviously Westbrook's still on the team. I'm gonna give it a B minus. I don't hate the moves that they made. I think the Lonnie Walker is gonna be similar to what Malik Monk was last year, like a 1-year deal for a young guy to prove his value. I like that. Troy Brown Jr. I think that was a solid move. Getting Damian Jones in there, JTA, Max Christie. I like all those moves. Like the Lakers, they're a team. You have LeBron James, who's still amazing. Hopefully AD can get somewhat back to what he was like the 2020 season. That's it. This team's as good as AD goes. So hopefully he's back to his form. But when you have those two playing at their best, less is more. Like, you don't need to go name chase a superstar player. Less is more when you have two guys that are that elite when they're at their best. So I'm gonna give it a B minus. If they can move off of Russell Westbrook, whether it's for Kyrie or not, it will definitely be an even better offseason. But I don't hate the moves that they made at all. I think Pelinka actually did a decent job this offseason.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in that like B range-ish as well. I think I might give him a B. I think the main thing I want to add is, well, it's once again not a thing that happened during the free agency period. Bringing in Coach Darvin, he just kind of, I don't know, he just kind of has that presence about him that I feel like he can really lead this team and be like a voice in the locker room that can kind of calm things down and bring it together. And there's a chance that if they keep this big three together, or big three if we want to call it that, I know they haven't had a ton of success together, but you know what I mean. I think he might be able to make it work. And I don't know if that's just because he's new and it's just the way he presents himself or what it may be, but he gives me faith in the team, whether that's misguided or not, knowing the way their previous season went down. But just off of what Tyrik already said, plus the coaching change, I'll give them a B.
I don't know how to feel, because I don't mind their moves, but at the same time, I don't see anything here that's going to be like, okay, yeah, this really changes my opinion on the Lakers. Like, I will say I'm glad that they went with younger guys this time around, not just bringing in a bunch of older vets who are a bit more injury prone, who can't compete as much on a given night, who don't have as much energy to bring on the defensive end. So I will give them that. But you lost arguably your best player last year outside of LeBron, AD, and Westbrook, and Malik Monk going to the Kings. Lonnie Walker is a bit of a replacement for that role, but he's not anywhere near as good of a replacement or consistent of a replacement as far as I'm concerned. And that's saying something, because Malik Monk can be inconsistent in his own right. And like, there's fine additions here, but you're talking about Damian Jones or Thomas Bryant having to be your starting center currently, which I'm not that excited about. Thomas Bryant hasn't looked great since coming off of a serious injury and is coming off of a serious injury. And Damian Jones has shown flashes in Sacramento, but that's very much just some flashes. Troy Brown Jr., Juan Toscano Anderson, they're fine wing pieces, but these are wing pieces that were not playing regular minutes on their former teams. And there's a reason for that. There's fine players. I like Juan Toscano Anderson, but he's going to have to play a fairly significant role on this team, and that's a problem. So I think they've made some fine moves, but it's not really moving the needle. And so I'm probably giving them a C right now, because they're fine. Their additions have been fine, but they haven't done anything that really makes me feel any differently about this year's Lakers team than last year's Lakers team.
That's fair. I guess once again, I'm falling into the trap. I'm just banking on Anthony Davis not being as shitty as he's been the last 2 seasons, because he's been garbage the last 2 years. Like, I'm just praying like he's actually good this year, and relatively like can play like 60 games. Like, that's what I'm banking on, because if AD's anywhere near his best, it's a totally different Laker team, because defensively we know what he brings to the table. When he's locked in on the offensive side of the floor, it's a whole different team. And then you're looking at guys like JTA, Troy Brown Jr. They don't have to do that much out of their element for them to be effective. When this team won the championship, they only asked KCP, like, just hit two 3-pointers. They only asked like Rondo, like, just come in, like, play decent. Like, they didn't ask those guys to do anything too much out of their element. They just asked Danny Green, just hit a 3, hit one, hit one 3-pointer. Like, that's all they asked those guys. So I guess I'm just banking on Anthony Davis coming back and being anywhere near like his best form. He's been working with lethal shooter though, so hopefully he's not shooting 18% from 3 this year. Hopefully.
His jumper is such a crazy story, man. Like he was making everything in the bubble, and everything. I'm not even going to bring up the Disney thing because I hate the bubble jokes as much as anybody. But it's like ever since then, I don't know where this man's jump shot went. It's like everybody talks about him not being healthy, him being off the floor, but it's like, yeah, when he was on the floor, the man couldn't shoot. I don't really, and we know he can. That's the biggest thing is that we know he can.
Bro, it's funny you say that, Gabe, because I was talking to my dad literally 2 days ago, and we was talking about Anthony Davis, and he was like, my dad, he actually watches basketball, but I know he just looked at AD's numbers and was like, man, he averaged like 24, 25. I'm like, Dad, you know there's a difference between a good 25 and a shitty 25. He was putting up a shitty 25. He was shooting like his splits were terrible. Like his field goal percentage wasn't as good as it usually is. 3-point percentage was like, I think the worst in the league. Like it was worse than Russell Westbrook. And his mid-range jumpers were not falling there. I think he was shooting below league average there. Like he was really bad last year. And he was bad the year before, but he missed a lot of games that year. So I kind of gave him a pass. But he has to have a good year. Now, I'm not gonna say MVP caliber year, but he has to be a bona fide all-star starter type of season for him.
This is 3 teams in a row now where it's like honestly 4 teams in a row now, and this just seems to be the theme with the whole Western Conference. It's just stay healthy. Like we've done Nuggets, Pelicans, Clippers, Lakers, all in that order. Just stay healthy.
Facts, man. Facts. This Lakers team will go as far as AD and LeBron can stay healthy, especially AD, but even LeBron to an extent at this point in time in his career. So, and that's ultimately where it stands. Those guys don't stay healthy, they suck.
Won't be the last time we talk about the Lakers this offseason, for sure.
Definitely true. Moving on to the recipients of one of the bigger names traded in the NBA offseason, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who acquired Rudy Gobert and made some interesting moves alongside that. And I'll get your thoughts first from you, Tyrik.
We kind of touched on this trade last episode. I like the trade. They did give up a lot, but I like it. I think they're going to be a better team. The Kyle Anderson pickup was very underrated. Nobody really talked about that. I think that was a solid dude to bring in. They got Wendell Moore, who's like already a 30-year-old rookie, so he'll be able to come in and produce right away. I like the moves, man. I like the moves. I would give them a B+. B+. They're going to be a much better team. Championship, I don't know about that, but they will be a much better team this year, especially defensively.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say the exact same thing. It's like the Wendell Moore pickup, he can really supplement a little bit of that depth you lost. Same with Kyle Anderson. They can supplement it a little bit. So I'm glad it's like they use free agency to their advantage rather than just making the trade and staying quiet. But you gave up so much. But at the end of the day, it's probably a net positive. And by probably it's a net positive. You bring in one of at least a top 3 defender in the league. As much as we like to rag on him and hate on him, that the talent around him and the scheme around him in Utah really did him no favors as much as it might have brought out his like highlights in the regular season. It was built to bring out his lowlights in the postseason. So
yes,
him playing in what's hopefully a better scheme can really maximize him within just being around this core. As a whole, I really think there's nowhere for them to go but up. They're another team that I can really see competing for like a top 4 seed in this playoffs. And the West is just so deep this year. But it's like we just talked about 4 straight teams before that it's like really need them to stay healthy. Minnesota can be better than all those teams because based on what they've shown me, I fully believe this team can at least play.
Yeah, facts. Yeah, like the Rudy Gobert edition was obviously very good. And as you mentioned, they just gave up a ton of assets to acquire him. The positive thing with regards to how much they gave up is as much as they did trade away a lot of depth, they had a nice amount of excess depth on top of the fact that they did add some guys in free agency, like you talked about Kyle Anderson. Brent Forbes was also added on a 1-year deal. With regards to Jared Vanderbilt being traded away, That is now a role that Kyle Anderson can pick up more minutes in. With Malik Beasley being traded away, you brought in Bryn Forbes as a veteran presence at that position. I expect Jalen Noel to take up a big part of that role. I expect a much improved season from him as he's shown some very positive flashes in limited minutes. So they're in a fine spot with regards to depth, even though they traded away a lot of it. I think the only significant loss from this trade that hasn't been replaced and can't really be replaced from an intangible standpoint is Patrick Beverley. But there's no doubt immediately as an on-the-court improvement, they have improved significantly with the addition of Rudy Gobert. And like you talked about, Gabe, with the mention of schemes from Minnesota's defense and helping Rudy Gobert be more effective and helping the team defense be more effective. I mean, Chris Finch helped D'Angelo Russell look like a very good defender last year thanks to that scheme. So I have no doubt that with the addition of another elite defender in Rudy Gobert, you throw him with McDaniels now in the starting lineup, with Anthony Edwards hopefully continuing to improve on defense. There's no reason why this team can't be a top 3, top 5 defensive team in the league at the very least. And so I think there's very high upside for them. Ultimately, how good this team becomes is going to be dependent on the continued development of Anthony Edwards. But that elite level defense they now have alongside Rudy Gobert is going to put them in a very good spot. And as you guys mentioned, there's no reason why they can't compete for a top 4 spot in the West next season.
I just wish they could have kept Pat Bev, man. That's just my biggest thing, because there really is no replacement. That's just from the intangible standpoint, from just the culture shift standpoint. I think I've talked about this before, but it's like if his impact on this team's culture can stay beyond his physical presence, he's done a good thing for their franchise, even if he was only there for a year.
I think it has a chance too, because they got a little taste of being good. So they'll probably realize, like, yeah, we actually got to lock in. And you got Rudy Gobert there. I don't like Rudy. He'll probably not make them play defense, but just seeing how good he is, they'll probably be a little more motivated to still be a good on that side of the floor. Even though they weren't great all season long, but they had their moments where they were, and had moments where they were, back to their old ways. But I think they'll be fine. I think they will.
Yeah, their biggest thing is really, I think, just in the transition game. I was watching a video like the other day, and it was some stat where, like, after a made basket, they were like one of the best defenses in the league when they could actually like set up. But then after a miss where the other team just gets to run transition, like their defense was not great at all. So fixing that transition is going to be probably their biggest thing to work on. But I mean, with all like the roster changes now, it's like you're integrating a lot of things. So we'll see.
Definitely.
Moving on to the Portland Trailblazers, a team that has once again decided to keep Damian Lillard, and they're going to run it back without CJ McCollum for the first time in a very long time. What are your thoughts, Gabe, on the Portland Trailblazers moves this offseason?
It's a dub. I got to be honest. Their direction is so weird, and I still have no idea what their end goal is or what they're trying to do here. But at the end of the day, just look at the moves list. It's like when you have Damian Lillard on your roster and you have a top 10 pick, if you decide, okay, we're going to keep our guys and still try to be competitive, I think taking like a Shaedon Sharpe is interesting because he is kind of like he has like super high upside, but it's not. They didn't really draft a guy that could like come in and be like a day one contributor. So from that perspective, it's a little strange. But then the actual players they got in Jeremy Grant and Gary Payton is like, that's the exact kind of players you want around a Damian Lillard. Two-way guys that can do some of the dirty work, can play defense around him and let him just control the offense, keeping Anthony Simons to kind of be on the offensive side with him. Because like I think they kind of took care of some of their weaknesses. But at the same time, it's just like a weird mix of old and young, and I don't really know if I like it. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give them a B because I really like Gary Payton and I like Jeremy better than what they gave up to get them. The only player they lost in free agency was Eric Bledsoe, who's not really a contributor anymore.
They should be celebrating.
But I still have I just don't know, man. I can't push it any higher than that just because it's such a weird roster construction.
There's some moves I really like, and there's just some that I don't like as much. Or maybe it's just like in totality, like it's just like you said, it's just weird. It's a weird mix of guys that they brought back. I'm gonna say like a B minus. The Grant trade was fine. Is he gonna be your number 2, number 3 option? I guess. The Gary Payton move, I think that was their best move of the offseason. I'm not a fan of running it back with another small backcourt. And I don't think they got better enough defensively to supplement for that. We'll see how good Anthony Simons can be playing with Damian Lillard, because he was totally different when he had somebody else on the court that took the ball out of his hands. Like he was still good, but he wasn't as great as he looked when he was the lone ball handler. So I'm gonna say B minus. Some moves I like, some moves I don't. We'll see. We'll see Chauncey Billups with actually a competent team this season, see what he can do. Shout out to Dame though for signing the richest extension ever. Like that was kind of crazy, man. But Portland takes care of their guys, as we can see.
I just need to say real quick too, I do not want to see Yusuf Nurkic running center for this team anymore. I'm so sorry. I
didn't want to be the one to say. I feel like I take a lot of shots at Nurk, man.
Listen. I love that he sticks up for his guys, and he's a very great teammate, and he's an NBA player. Like he deserves to be in the league, but he is not a defensive center. And this is a team, like you said, a small backcourt. You need a defensive center on this team.
It's like the same team, just a different variation. Like they upgraded the wing positions a little bit. Backcourt's still going to be weak as hell defensively. And like you said, Nurk is just not a good defender, especially after the big injury he had. He's just not a good defender anymore. Or he actually never was good, actually. So,
yeah, no, this is exactly what I was going to say. Like this team with the backcourt they have, whether it was Dame or CJ, whether it's now Dame and Anthony Simons, needs a good rim protecting center, because they are going to allow a lot of dribble penetration, to say the least, and they don't have that, and so ultimately that significantly limits their ceiling. If I have to just judge this offseason independently of how I feel about their direction, because I don't like their direction, if I'm judging it solely based on what they've done this offseason, then I'll give them a B, because I think their free agency additions have been fine. Jeremy Grant was a good trade. I think Gary Payton is a good fit. As much as Yusuf Nurkic isn't a good fit, at least you got someone back at center, I guess, and Anthony Simons being locked up is good. But the Shaedon Sharpe pick is odd. It's just really odd. That's the biggest thing that holds it back for me, is you had a top 7 pick, and you took arguably the biggest project of the NBA draft. Meanwhile, this is one of the few teams in the NBA that doesn't have a G League team, so you're not even sending them down to the G League to develop. So is he playing regular minutes? Is he playing 20 to 25 minutes a night off your bench? Is he just not going to play, and he's just going to sit on the bench and train with the team? It's a bit of a weird pick for me, but the Jeremy Grant edition is fine. The Gary Payton edition is good. But like you said, Tyrik, it feels very similar to teams in the past of Portland. They've just swapped in and out a few players. Anthony Simons is now playing the role of CJ McCollum. You now have Jeremy Grant, who is a bit of an upgrade on the wing over what they've had in the past when you compare it to guys like Robert Covington or more in the past of Al-Farouq Aminu. But it's not really enough to significantly raise the ceiling of this team that much. And in a Western Conference, that has improved even more so from years previous, where they were making the Western Conference final. So it's a fine team, but that's about it. It's a fine team.
Yeah.
Man, I remember when this team was sending out a starting lineup of it was like Dame, CJ, Al-Farouq Aminu, Mo Harkless, and Mason Plumlee.
That team was
good.
And
literally, I don't know. I look at this team today, and I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like it's still the same team.
Yeah,
they have not been the same since they lost Harkless and Aminu. Like, that's crazy. Like, they really have not been the same team since that moment.
Really haven't. That was their best team. They had some good defensive wings. They had a center who could defend a bit. They don't have it anymore.
I would be interested to know if they tried to offer anything for Rudy Gobert.
They don't have that much assets. They don't have anything close to what Minnesota gave up.
I mean, maybe they was bidding something,
Yeah, that's true.
and then Minnesota's like, oh yeah, we gotta throw the whole sink at the Jazz to get Rudy. Maybe that's what happened. Because imagine Rudy on this team. I might like it a little more. I mean, depending on what they would have had to give up, but even so, I think I would like that a lot.
I don't know though, because if you think about it, it's like Rudy on Portland. When you think about it, the big problem in Utah was Rudy was getting exposed because they were getting dribble penetrations on everybody. And it's just there was like no defenders around him, and that was like the whole problem. So if he would have came to Portland, I feel like it would have been the same thing.
I think it depends on who you would still have depending on who you would have to give up in that hypothetical trade. It would depend a lot on that, because if you could still have bring Gary Payne in, they got Josh Hart's still in the roster.
Josh Hart's still there, yeah.
Pretty good defender. Like, they would probably be the same team. But I mean, they got Dame though. Dame's an upgrade over Donovan Mitchell. So
a slightly better Utah, maybe. But
maybe.
Yeah, they'd be better, but I still don't think we'd be looking at this team and saying, yeah, okay, they're a title contender. I think it's like, yeah, okay, they're good.
I mean,
but
that's the thing. Utah was like a second round out team, and Portland with Rudy Gobert, I still feel like it would be a second round out team.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I'm not taking them over like a future Memphis, Dallas, Golden State, or Phoenix.
I don't know about Phoenix, man.
I still got to give Phoenix the benefit of the doubt. I still got to give them. I can't judge them too much on one game, even though that one game was absolutely pitiful.
29 first half points is crazy.
If that's the last we see of Chris Paul like playing competitive, meaningful ball, bro, I would be sick. Like if he comes out next year and he's just not the same, and it's like that was the last of like good CP3, I'll be sick, man. I don't know. Sick.
I don't know what this man did, man, but his karma is insane. He had to have done some really dirty stuff in his life, man.
It's really just because he tried to go to the Lakers.
Maybe. David Stern was not letting that happen. He said, nope.
I feel like when David Stern like passed down the commissioner role to Adam Silver, he said, nah. CP3 just no.
Make sure he does not get a ring.
Really though. Really.
Who's next?
The Sacramento Kings,
yes.
who we might actually not slander for once on the pod.
No Kings
last episode,
slander.
we said nothing bad about him, which is like the first time probably ever.
Facts.
For real.
Facts.
What would y'all? I feel like this is an A, like an A- A type of off season. I liked it a lot.
Honestly, Kevin Huerter, I think he can fill in for DiVincenzo enough. Not saying he's as good as DiVincenzo, but I think he can fill in enough. I really like Keegan Murray, as I've said many times, and he has proven me right in Summer League. He's nice. He can come in and contribute right away, I think, and I think he does have some upside to improve. Along with that, Malik Monk, like we were talking about earlier, he was probably the fourth best player on the Lakers last year, and given how bad AD was and how bad Westbrook was for stretches, there was a lot of times where he was the second best player on that team. So I really like adding him to their backcourt. I assume he'll probably be in that like 6-man type role. I doubt he'll be a starter. But, I mean, that's something he's really good at. So bringing him in, bringing in Keegan Murray, who I think can be a franchise piece, I will give them an A. Where do I think this team will be this season? Probably still like a 10 seed at best. But positives, net positives.
Maybe they can be the surprise this year, because there's always a team that surprises you. Maybe the Kings can be that team. I don't know. I'm trying to talk myself into it.
I think the Kings road to the playoffs is really like all four of those, like they need to stay healthy teams. All four of them like are just injured and not clicking again. That's like, I think that's the Kings road to maybe sneak in.
Yeah, that definitely could play a part. Whether Utah decided to trade away Donovan Mitchell or not plays a part. How good Portland play or not, I think plays a part, because I don't think Portland are as much of a lock to get into the play-in as some people think they are, personally at least. So I think those teams on the fringe like that, and some of those teams dealing with injuries, will certainly play its part.
Nah, Dame will be in the play-in because he's not running from the grind. He needs his back against the wall, man. He's not locking up anything else except that 7 through 10 spot because it's high impact basketball, straight grind.
I will say though, Sabonis at the 5 kind of worries me. That's the one thing that if he is a starting center, I don't know if they, or even if they start him and Rashawn Holmes, I'm not a big fan of that. That's the only thing that really worries me. But like based off of their offseason moves, I like the trades they made, the signings. Keegan Murray, they did a really good job. Like the Kings did good. I can't believe I'm saying that, but they did good.
Yeah, no, they definitely have done well. Kevin Huerter, I think, is going to be a very seamless fit alongside De'Aaron Fox in the starting lineup. Malik Monk, as you mentioned, is going to be a good 6-man for them. Keegan Murray looks to be a very good guy who's going to be able to impact right away. Sabonis at center defensively is a concern. The only thing that I like on this Kings roster that makes me feel a little bit better about that is that Chimezie Metu, based on how much of a role he plays, can play some time at the center spot as well. So between him and Rashawn Holmes, they can have a few different lineup rotations there where they can hide Sabonis a little bit on certain matchups and on certain teams. But ultimately, Sabonis is going to be playing the majority of his minutes at the 5, which is a problem. But Sabonis playing minutes at the 4 defensively is a problem too. So I think that's something you just have to take with Sabonis is you're going to get that offensive production, but those defensive concerns are going to exist. But generally speaking, they've made some positive moves. I'm going to give them a B+ solely based on the fact that they don't have wings. Their wings currently now, after Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray, are Chimezie Metu, who's more of a power forward / center, and Trey Lyles, who's more of a power forward / center. They don't have a backup small forward to speak of at all. So that needs to be addressed unless they want Terrence Davis to A, be playing regular minutes, and B, be playing regular minutes at small forward. If he's even healthy and ready to go for the beginning of the season, which I think he is, but he is coming off of a fairly significant injury last season. So they need some type of addition there, or they might get cooked in the second unit by forwards. But outside of that, generally speaking, it has been quite a positive offseason. They've made some good additions to the backcourt. Keegan Murray was a very good pick at pick 4, as much as Jaden Ivey from an upside prospect standpoint is probably the better prospect for what Sacramento need right now to win right now. I think Keegan Murray was the right pick. So positive moves, like you guys mentioned, from Sacramento. It's just a positive direction. Whether it gets them into the play-in, that's tight just because the West is so good right now, but positive moves.
Yeah, I think I'm about to say something crazy, guys. I think I might give the Spurs an A.
The Spurs?
I think I might give the Spurs an A.
Let's hear it.
I would give him like a B+.
Just maybe an A-, we'll say. Because it's
Stand on it. Stand on the A. Stand on the A. You said it, man. Go ahead. Talk your stuff, man. Talk your stuff.
So it's like the players they brought in. I might have a little bias here on the Malachi Branham pick. Might have just a little bit. But I think they brought in players with good upside. We talked a lot about them having a bazillion guards. They kind of cleared out the room a little bit, and they brought in a significant amount of pick equity. And I think we've judged almost every team so far in this video of how much better did you get. But with the Spurs, it's like a different way of grading. It's like, how well did you set up your rebuild? And now I just feel like they have a lot of talent, a little bit more variety of talent. I believe they still have most of their own picks, if not all of their own picks.
They do. They have all of their own future picks.
And they got a significant amount of pick equity, which, yes, picks can be overrated sometimes. But in this situation, I think it was the right move. And this is also a time where I think literally them and Indiana, to me, are the only teams that are really just going to be like super bottom of the barrel.
OKC.
I think OKC can be better than
they're going to choose to be bad.
I think they might choose to be bad, but they if they really wanted to, they could probably be significantly better than San Antonio and Indiana. And so I think just not only the fact that they set up a rebuild well, but that they set up a rebuild well in a situation where A, not a lot of teams are bottoming out, and B, next year's draft class is incredibly stacked. Their timing, along with everything else, to me gives them an A.
Well said. Well said. I'll give him a B plus, because you could do all this and maybe not even get the top pick, which I think that's what their main goal is. But I think the return of the DeJounte Murray trade was great. I like their draft. I think the Sohan pick was good. We'll see how he develops offensively. But the Spurs, they got the shot doctor. They might get something out of him offensively. The Brandon pick was very good. Blake Wesley, they did a really good job in the draft. Yeah, we'll see. I would expect Jakob Poeltl to maybe get traded. Probably get traded sometime either before the offseason is over, or maybe by the trade deadline, because he's going to be a commodity. Teams will definitely want him on the roster. But yeah, I do love that they picked the direction, though. More teams need to decide to do this. Just pick a true direction. Are we going to try and contend? Or are we going to rebuild?
Man, Jakob Poeltl going to Portland might be interesting. I would keep an eye on that.
I was just thinking about that. He would be decent there.
Just because we were just talking about that, Portland needs like a rim protecting big. Jakob Poeltl can get that to you, and he doesn't really fit on the Spurs that well anymore.
He's not really like a rim protector. He's just a very solid defender.
Exactly. Just in general. Just like a defensive big. That's something they should look at.
Yeah, and he's only got 1 year left on his contract, so I don't see a world where he doesn't get moved.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the team will throw a first round pick to get him.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm going with an A- for the Spurs. Biggest reason being that they just picked a direction. That's the biggest part of it. They've just been sitting in the middle for the last 5 years, either being on the fringe of the playoffs, on the fringe of the play-in tournament, or in the play-in tournament. And as you mentioned, Gabe, the timing was very good. You sold high on DeJounte Murray. You traded away at a time where he is coming off an all-star performance season. You're trading him away where he only has 2 years left on his contract. So as this contract continues to wind down, his value is probably only going to slightly decline. Not to mention the fact that will he have another all-star appearance season again? Maybe not, just surely due to the number of good guards that are currently in the league. Throw that in alongside the fact, as you mentioned, that the draft is going to be so good next year. It was the right time to move off to DeJounte Murray to maximize the value of DeJounte Murray and to maximize the time of when you're going to be entering the draft with a high selection. So I think it was a good time for them to rebuild. It was a good time to pick a direction. It's about time they picked a direction. But because of that and because of the good return for DeJounte Murray, I have to give him an A-.
Keldon Johnson, most improved. He about to average like 35 points.
Hey, they really don't have a lot of people. I really just like – I feel like after like DeMar DeRozan left and they kind of saw that DeJounte was their clear-cut number one guy, I feel like they probably had this calculated from the start where they were like, okay. Because I just feel like the Spurs front office is smart enough to know, like, this draft with all this talent is coming up. Let's get this one guy to maximize his value as much as possible. Get off him and then bottom out while we have all this pick equity. I don't know. Maybe I'm just giving them more credit than they deserve. But, like, if that was their plan after they kind of saw that, like, DeMar was on the way out and that kind of era was over, shout outs to the Spurs, man.
Yeah, shout out to Dev, too. He made a great video on them, which we talked about last week.
Appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it. Yeah, picking a direction. That is the name of the game in the NBA right now. If you're sitting in the middle, you're just not really progressing anywhere meaningful. So shout out to the Spurs for doing that and finally picking a direction. Moving on to OKC, who might be starting to pick a certain direction a little bit too much, but have certainly continued to add via the draft this offseason. We'll get your thoughts first, Gabe, on the offseason from the OKC.
Chet is going to be the product of a lot of discourse, to say the least. I like that they stuck with their guns, though. When there was like the change at the top of the draft, they knew that Chet was the guy they wanted, and they got him. I think he's already meshing really well with like the rest of the team. It seems like him and Josh get along really well, which is nice because, I mean, I don't know. It's like just specifically the fact that it's Josh Giddey, it's like you got this big that you just brought in, him meshing with like your main playmaker. That just feels right. So I like that. I like that they brought in other players to just continue to stockpile that. But at the same time, this needs to be it. After this, they need to start trying to compete. You've had enough draft picks. You have enough players on this roster, enough projects, enough people you try to develop. You have enough now, so where it's time to try and start competing. I think this season you really figure out, okay, who are we keeping around for the long term? Who are we willing to move off of? What's kind of our future plans to try and start winning again? And then maybe after that, you flip some of these players for some veterans or just bring people in through free agency or whatever just to kind of get just some older experienced players on the team. Maybe they can push for a 10 seed this year. Then after that, sign some players to try and make it deep. But I think I will give them a B, simply based off the fact that they made the right pick, but they didn't really do anything that crazy impressive. But it's definitely positive. They got better, but it's time to start winning.
Yeah, like you said, this has to be it, bro. I mean, 4 players drafted in basically the top 34 picks. 3 in the top, I think, 12. Like that's an insane amount, bro. And it's to the point where they're having to waive young players who have actually shown good signs. Like they just waived Isaiah Roby, like just straight up waived him. Young dude just waived him, which is I just don't like that, man. Like you just picks are one, like having a lot of picks are one thing, but having so many to where you just got to straight up get rid of guys like without getting anything in return is just kind of crazy. I'm gonna give them a B. I think that they did good in the draft, but man, this team, they're talented enough to where they can be somewhat competitive. Not like playoffs for sure, but play in. Like they're talented enough. Shea's good enough. Giddey's shown good signs. Lou Dort is good enough. Like
they can have a good starting 5. Like they can have a solid, like a starting 5 of like 5 NBA starters.
Yeah, like
they
got talent. They got so much like good young talent. It's just like they choose to be bad, which kind of ticks me off a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but shout out to Lou Dort though for getting the big bag because somebody on the roster had to get paid. So shout out to him.
Yeah, 100%. I'm probably giving them a B as well. It's very much at a point for me now where they have one more year where if they want to tank for a great draft class next year, fine. If we get into next season, and I've echoed this thought before, but if they get into next season and they're still continuing to tank, it's a problem. Because as you mentioned, Tyrik, like you're waiving Isaiah Roby, and this was a concern I've had for OKC over the last couple of years, is you're just acquiring so many draft picks, which in turn is so many players being drafted. You just don't have a place for all of them. And I'm not saying Isaiah Roby is some amazing player, but that is a former draft pick that you have acquired that had value that you have now used, who is still a fine NBA player who obviously had interest across the league as he's now signed with the Spurs, that you just lose for nothing. And if that becomes a trend, that's a problem. And it is going to become a trend if they don't start to compete and start to move on from some of these draft picks to make win now moves. So one more year, that's fine. They had a good offseason. They made some good draft selections. I think Chet's going to be a good player alongside some of the other players they took, from Dieng to the Williams. And Lou Dort got his bag, and you got him locked up, which is good. But that's the problem. You have Lou Dort and SGA locked up now. These guys are going to start to expect to win soon. So they need to start doing that soon. They're fine for another year. But if they don't start making strides towards positive progress up the standings next season, then it becomes a bit more of a concern.
Well said. Couldn't have said that any better, bro.
Moving on to the Houston Rockets, a team that is a bit younger in its rebuild, but is still one of the teams that will be at the bottom of the Western Conference for next season. Moved off from Christian Wood this offseason as he enters the last year of his contract. What are your thoughts on Houston's offseason, Gabe?
I'm glad that they kind of committed to the direction. Not that they didn't already commit to the direction, because, I mean, like, they had John Wall just not playing, but it's like now, especially with the departure of Christian Wood as well, you're with your new group, you're with your young core. It's a new era officially. Every sort of baggage or like older players or anything from like the James Harden era is off the roster, and that's that. So I like that, and I think it's just good to see that it's like now you've completely reset. You've kind of completed the final stages of that. And I think they got a pretty solid core together. I like the Jabari pick. I mean, obviously when you're at 3, you know who the top 3 are. You get the third guy. It was a no-brainer. But I do think that Jabari can be really good, and I think he's a player that can be good next to a player like a Jalen Green. So, I mean, all across the board, it's like I like it. Is it anything that they did that wasn't like, kind of like a trade that you're like, or like a pick that you're like, okay, we should definitely do that. Nothing that really surprised me, I guess, is just the easiest way to say it. I think I'll give him a B+.
I was gonna say A-. They were one of my biggest draft winners. Just even outside of the Jabari pick, man, I love Tyrik Eason. I think even in summer league, he's been playing really well. Ty Washington could potentially be like just a good playmaker for them. And they got rid of Christian Wood. You got John Wall out of there. Very good offseason, man. I'm a fan of it. I'll give him an A-.
Now I'm going to give them a B+. It's just a solid offseason. You continue to bring in more young prospects. You get a little bit of assets back for Christian Wood. They're still fairly early in their rebuild stage. I think they're still a couple years away. They're probably the furthest away of the teams that started rebuilding over the last year or two, but they're in a good spot. They've made positive strides again from last season, but it's just continuing to draft well, and I think they did a pretty good job of that in the draft this year. But I don't have too much to say on Houston because I think they're still a fair bit away, but they're continuing in the right steps, positive steps for sure.
Oh man, that's the last team.
Man, and that's really that's every team. I think the best question to ask now is, out of like these 15 teams, who had the best offseason and who had the worst offseason?
Trying to remember all my grades.
I feel like I feel like the best is a good
like
chance that it's Dallas.
I think because I think we all consider giving them an A+.
Yeah, I think Dallas would probably have to be my top.
And that was really one of the only like super close to A+ at least that we considered.
I think the worst grade I gave was Phoenix. I think I gave them a D+.
Yeah, I think it would have been your worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I threw out a couple C-. There's a couple that I was definitely not the biggest fans of, but yeah. Phoenix is like the fact that kind of they have a player that kind of doesn't really want to be there. They haven't figured that out. He's still on the roster, and they've still somehow gotten worse this offseason.
Got worse outside of that, like man.
Yeah, that's tough. The Lakers are probably up there for me as well, just because.
You really hate their offseason, man.
I'm not a fan, man. I'm not a fan. I do not believe in this roster.
Polarizing. Definitely a polarizing. I see some people are like garbage, and then there's people like me. I'm actually kind of a fan of it. Yeah. This is the Lakers, though. There's always going to be just differing opinions on them.
It's just because it's like it's not. None of them are like Devin kind of said himself. None of them are needle movers. So it's like okay. Like this is a good move. This is a good move. This is a good move. But how many wins is this adding to your win total? And I think it's hard to do that at all in free agency when you have 3 players on max deals.
Yeah, the player making the most money is the worst out of the 3.
And who was Lonnie Walker their mid-level exception?
Yes. Yeah.
So
he got 6.5 mil.
It's like. Your mid-level exception that you could have used on something like you used that for a downgrade to Malik Monk.
I mean, but people were looking at Malik Monk last year like he was garbage, man. Like not garbage, but nobody was high on Malik Monk before last season. If we're being honest,
I thought he was decent.
I might have to throw my name in the hat as one of those guys. It definitely was a popular opinion. He did look good in that last year in Charlotte for like the last 2 months, though. He did look good for those 2 months.
He did. I remember he got hurt. He got hurt, I think. Like he was playing so good, then he got hurt, I think.
I was pretty high on him coming out of Kentucky, and then he didn't really do much for a while. Then he just started having like random 30-point games. But then he just seems like an inconsistent guy that's just like putting up numbers occasionally because the team's not good. But he showed he can be decent.
There were tweets on my Twitter account of me basically saying Malik Monk is like the next big thing. I thought he was gonna be so good, like really good. Until I realized he was like 6'3" on a good day. I'm like, oh, never mind.
Dude, I was feeling crazy. Like going into the 2017 draft, I almost thought he was better than De'Aaron. which was that was a
I don't know about
cold
that,
take.
but
That was a cold take.
I thought he was a steal where he got picked though. I think he got picked at like 11 or something like that, and I'm like, that's a steal.
It was early teens for sure.
But bro, like in college, he seemed like he was like 6'5" because it's just like how long his arms is and just how high he be jumping and stuff. And then I remember seeing like, oh, he's like 6'3". I'm like, oh, that's not good. That might hinder him just a little bit.
Bro's literally my height. That's crazy.
Slight flex.
Nah, because you said 6'3" on a good day, and I'm like, yeah, I'm 6'2 and a half. So I guess I am 6'3" on a good day, you know.
Yeah. Man.
Overall, though, really, I don't feel like we didn't give that many like A plus grades, and we didn't give that many like D minus and like no Fs. I don't think we gave anything below like a D plus. So it seems like the West was not really anything like anything crazy. Like we gave some pretty polarizing grades for some Eastern teams.
Yeah, no one in the West was as bad as the Hornets. So.
And nobody was like as good as the Pistons.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like the East had the best and the worst of the offseason.
He gave the Pistons an A+, man. I love Detroit. I love Detroit basketball.
I feel like there was one other team that I thought about giving an A+ to. It might have been Atlanta.
Did one of y'all give the Celtics an A+?
I don't think so.
No,
I think in the A's, but I don't think it was an A+.
I feel like I was definitely at an A or an A- just because.
Or I think I said A-. I didn't want to be too biased.
You make the finals, and then you get better. You know, you can't really hate on that at all.
Charlotte's F, it wasn't like a 67%. It was like a 40% F. Like it was garbage. Like just like you're not saving this grade. There's no way you're saving this grade.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like I've become a lot more critical of Washington as we further got into the offseason, but
that's fair.
They survive for now, but
I'm more mad at Washington than Charlotte because one of the biggest hits to Charlotte was the fact that Miles Bridges is just like
a dumbass.
Yeah, pretty much. And so just the fact that that's out of their control is like it's just kind of a tough break. Every single thing wrong with Washington is Washington's fault.
Who's the GM over there now? I know they got rid of Grunfield, but whoever's there now is not doing that much of a better job.
Wizards GM is
Tommy
Shepard.
Oh God.
He received a contract extension in November of 2021. Amid their fast start to the season, and that blew up in their face pretty quick, unfortunately.
Hey, I was right. Because I remember last offseason, I was gassing them up. I'm like, man, they're going to be a playoff team. And then, like, a couple months into the season, they was like 12 seed. I'm like, okay.
They had, I felt like the second half of the season with Westbrook, like, they were kind of starting to turn up a little bit. You know, they made that playoff push to get that 8 seed, and they were solid. They had a nice little duo going, and if they were going to keep trying to compete with Beal, they just never should have even gave him up, to be honest.
But even still, I don't think I'd feel any differently about this team because what was a duo of Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook really going to do?
It's being more fun than bringing KCP and Montrezl Harrell.
Definition of mid.
Yeah, like they're just a slightly better mediocre team. Like they're still just in the middle.
They legit lost a playing game to Jason Tatum by himself.
Facts.
Jason Tatum, Kemba on one knee, Evan Fournier. Like, y'all really lost to that team. That's just embarrassing.
Yeah, that's the most unfortunate thing with them now is they're locked in to being bang average. And there's literally nothing they can do about it unless Beal decides he wants to leave, which given the fact he just re-signed after this long in Washington and not having success, probably isn't that likely.
The no trade clause might make them have the worst offseason. That might make them have the worst offseason. I just remembered the fact that literally they can't get rid of him if they want to. If they finally decide they've had enough. Because we were talking last episode about how, like, I think it was Indy did not rebuild forever because they're like, okay, at least we got, like, somebody bringing in, like, some ticket sales, some jersey sales or whatever. but then they were last in attendance, and it was like terrible, and they got off of it. Washington, if they come to the same realization and decide they want to make a change, they can't.
Yeah. Not to mention Beal has a 15% trade kicker, so any team that trades for him is going to be paying him even more money, which it's even if Beal does want to end up getting traded at some point, it's going to be hard to just move that contract regardless. Like they've on multiple fronts got themselves in a spot where it is going to be extremely difficult to ever move off that contract if they want to.
Bro, $50 million a year for a fringe All NBA player is insane.
It's literally this is like the 19th best player in the league, and he might
not even be.
I don't think I had him as a top 5 shooting guard going into last season, to be honest. I don't know if I did.
Yeah, and fair enough.
I think I had him like 6 because he could score the ball. He showed a little bit of playmaking flashes last year, but I think it's because he had to.
Yeah.
It's just like because if they pretty much have to wait at least like 2-3 years to even realize that they would want to move on. Because then if you're trying to trade him, like nobody's trading for Bradley Beal with 4 years on his contract.
No.
But for that much money, it's like at the minimum probably 2 years left is when people would trade for him. And so if you want to like start moving on before that, say 1 year passes and we're like, okay, we need to change this. He might sit there like John Wall did in Houston for 2 seasons if that were to happen.
Bro, if I was a GM of that team, I would have traded him like 2 years ago. Like once I knew John Wall was gone, I probably would have let him have his breakout year, and then I would have traded him.
Literally, like what the Spurs did with DeJounte Murray. Like DeMar leaving San Antonio would be like John Wall leaving. Let your player that you still have get his value up, put up crazy stats, show that he's like a nice player, and then get off of him while you can.
It's better to trade somebody couple years earlier than a couple years too late.
It's like okay, you were trying to compete when you made the Westbrook move, but then when you move off Westbrook, now okay, you're not competing in this East with Bradley Beal and then the couple role players that you traded Westbrook for. It's like as soon as you make that trade, just rebuild.
Yeah. I mean, we could be talking about this team like we're talking about Detroit and Orlando, and instead they're honestly the team that I'm probably the least negative about in the league right now. Because they have even less upside than teams in the middle like Portland, and they're not committing to a rebuild.
Literally, the Brooklyn Nets gave up their entire future for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, and they still they came out with a solid rebuild, bro. Like, you can do it.
Teams are scared to fully commit, man. It took Indiana like 2 decades to do so.
It took Atlanta a very long time too, and they flipped their stuff around really quick. They literally, from like the Al Horford era to like the Trae Young era, it was like a 1.5 flip.
They was bad, I think, for 2 seasons because they were bad to get Trae Young, and then they were bad his rookie year. Then after that, they've been a playoff team.
Made the conference finals in his second year, I think.
Yeah, like no, yeah, was it or no? That might have been year 3.
Year 3, yeah.
Year 3,
So they were bad for his first 2 years.
You just kind of forget about his second year because I don't even think they went to the bubble.
No, but he was an all-star starter, and they was like the worst team in the East.
Yeah, because they were literally one of like the 8 teams that didn't go to the bubble.
Yes.
Which is really crazy. There's a couple teams in the league that really just had like everybody talks about how the bubble offseason was so short, but like those like 8 teams that didn't go to the bubble legitimately had like a ridiculously long offseason. Warriors didn't even capitalize, though. They came back the next year and were just Steph Curry and whoever.
Steph Curry and bums.
Steph Curry and, I mean, I don't want to say what Flight would say, but and the rest are nobody.
Who else did? It was the Warriors, Hawks. The Knicks did not go to the bubble. The Wizards. No, they didn't. The Wizards did not make.
I don't think the Hornets.
No, they did.
I feel like the Hornets and the Pistons were both not there.
Hornets, yeah, they were bad. Pistons,
the Cavs weren't there.
Cavs weren't there.
I don't think the Bulls were either.
No, the Bulls were not there. They were garbage. 7.
And then Timberwolves, Pelicans.
Timberwolves.
There was, I think out of like the 8 that were not there, there was only like 3 teams in the East that didn't go.
Yeah.
But the West had a little bit more like separation of like who was definitely out.
Yeah. The West, it looks like we're Spurs, Kings, Pels, Timberwolves, Warriors. And the East was...
No, the Spurs were there.
Or no, were the Spurs there? Right, the Spurs
Pelicans were there too, because I remember JJ Redick was trying his hardest to make the playoffs.
Right.
Yeah, I know the Spurs were there because they had DeMar on the
Who
team.
was
They were
it?
Because
competitive.
it was weird. It was weird because they like I think the East only had like 9. I think they only had 9 teams, bro.
Yeah, I think it had to be.
Because the gap between 9 and 10 was like too much. It was like
I think it might have been just their 8 and then the Wizards, like the 8 that made the playoffs
so,
and the
yeah.
Wizards.
It might have been because, like
because
the
Bradley Beal didn't go to
Magic were
bubble.
the 8 seed with 33 wins. The Warriors had 25, and the Hornets had 23 as the 10.
Dude, I really think the Wizards might have. I think they might have went like 0-8 in the bubble.
Probably.
Yeah,
they
were.
had Bradley Beal.
They show us 2-8 in their last 10, so they said that they won their last game, so they probably won the last game and lost everything else.
Yeah, I think the West, because remember Phoenix
Phoenix
was
went
the
on the
last
8-0
team.
run.
Yeah, they were the last team to get the invite to the bubble.
Yeah,
And they
they
went
ended up
8-0 and they barely missed the playoffs. I think because the Spurs won their final game or something.
Yeah.
The Trailblazers had 35 wins, and it was the Grizzlies that were ahead of them that then played that play-in.
Oh yeah, I think it was the Grizzlies beating.
Yeah, and the Grizzlies had to play Portland in that play-in.
Bubble Dame might be like top 5 best basketball players I've ever seen.
Was it in the bubble where he had that like 55-point triple overtime game or something?
No, that was double OT in Denver 2021.
In Denver, okay. That was one of the craziest games I've ever seen. He was making he literally had Austin
Yes.
Rivers praying to God.
I remember they put Shaq Harrison in specifically to guard Dame. He still beat the buzzer
Dude,
and tied the game. Bro.
He was just making he just
Tough
get the ball.
shots.
He just
Step
get
backs,
the
top of the
ball,
key.
go to the
God.
3-point line. It wouldn't matter who was there.
They didn't decide to send a double or nothing. Like, I'm sorry. After he hit the first one, I'm sending a double. Get the ball out of his hands.
That's a wild man right there. That's a different man. Honestly, I know everybody's like, y'all are absolutely crazy for making the Steph Dame comparisons. Y'all forgot who Steph was, bro. Steph is that guy, and I'm not saying that Dame was ever better than Steph, but this dude was putting on some master classes.
Yeah, when it comes to just pure talent, like I don't think it was a debate, but Dame was definitely there. Like Dame will hold his own with Steph Curry for sure.
He probably had a nice little spot as the best point guard in the league while Steph was injured.
Oh, I don't even
It's
think
like-
it's close, honestly.
Yeah, and so if you can say you were the best of your position in the league for any significant stretch of time, it's like you have my respect for sure.
The bubble year, he was playing MVP level. They were just terrible. Like they couldn't defend anybody, so they were just a bad team. But he
Remember
was
when they
playing like
beat
the MVP level.
Didn't one of the TNT guys pick them after they won Game 1 against the Lakers?
Probably
Yeah.
Chuck.
I think it was Chuck.
Yeah. There
Chuck
were some
just-
people that were stupid high on Portland and thought they were just going to cause all of the upsets. And it's like, yeah, Dame's good, but it is still Portland.
CJ's back was messed up.
Who
Nurkic
like your
was their
wings?
starting center, bro.
Gary Trent was starting to break out, but like,
Oh, yeah, my guy Gary Trent. Yeah, but I mean, he had to guard LeBron. Like, he's a good defender, but that's LeBron James.
Yeah. The only man who can stop LeBron James is Jason Terry, and he is not in the league anymore. So
JJ Barea. Those are the true Jays. Jason Terry, JJ Barea.
that is true. That's 100% true.
Nah, facts.
Bro, I feel like I haven't had an NBA TikTok rant in a while. Like it's been a couple months, but it's time for another one, man. Listen. So there's this one podcast. I'm not gonna name them because I don't even want to give them that attention. But basically, everybody that's on there for the most part, they just give some piss poor takes, and it's definitely just like trying to bait for content. Like I can just tell. I tried to mute the account, but their videos keep popping up. So one day I'm scrolling, and one of their videos popped up. And this dude was giving the take, not going to give his name because he's just bad. But it was basically talking about how JJ Redick was talking about Bob Cousy. Like Bob Cousy wasn't shit. Like he was not like a talented basketball player. Like that's obvious. We know that. And dude really was trying to say like his exact words was Bob Cousy would run circles around JJ Redick. So I stitched the video. I'm like, I was kind of joking in a sense, but I was being serious at the same time. I'm like, bro, JJ Redick played in the same time as Bob Cousy. He would have been probably like the best white player in the league. Like he would have been probably dominant. And then people was like trying to rebuttal, like, oh, there's no 3-point line, blah, blah, blah. So I made another video like, okay, JJ Redick shot like 47% from mid-range in his career. Like he's still elite there. And even if you take away the 3-point line, he'll still probably take long jump shots, and he shot 41%. So he's stupid efficient, while Bob Cousy's ass never shot over 40% in his career. Like this all-time great never shot 40% in his career from the field.
Now here's let me ask you this, just out of curiosity. Who do you think would be a better ball handler? JJ Redick or Bob Cousy?
JJ Redick.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because he is not known for that like at all.
Yeah, but if you watch him at Duke, like he could put the ball on the floor a little bit. Not just a spot up shooter.
More than an NBA 75 point guard.
Bro, personally, I think I could have done Bob Cousy's job.
Passing it, if I was passing to Bill Russell, yeah.
If I dedicate all my time to being an NBA player, I feel like I could do Bob Cousy's job in the 1950s.
Bro, imagine
except for segregation and stuff, but that's nonetheless.
Imagine it being like 1962 and you're like the point guard of the Philadelphia Warriors. Like just throw the ball to Will.
Except like, bro, how do you're not taking jumpers? How do you not shoot 40% one time in your career? You played for a long. How do you not shoot 40% once? And you're just all-time great. Doesn't make any sense. Crazy. Does not make any. Who's the most average point guard in the world right now?
That's a tough question. I don't know why the first thing that came to my mind was Ish
Marcus
Smith
Smart.
for some reason.
Okay, Ish Smith. Ish Smith would probably, if we dropped him in the 1960s, he would probably dominate.
Man, his speed alone would just have him running circles around everyone.
You said Marcus Smart, like, bro, Marcus Smart is winning MVP, and
he might.
Like, if you dropped him in 1965, bro, like, they won't know what to do with him. They're burning him at the stake for witchcraft, bro.
And what be killing me is like it's like probably people younger than us that be saying this stuff. Like, bro, you damn sure did not watch no Bob Cousy. Like, you weren't even thought of. Your parents probably weren't even alive back then. Your grandparents might have been kids at that time. Like, y'all, I don't know why people be pushing for Cousy or John Stockton's another one. Like, they really be pushing these narratives. Like, bro, y'all know nothing about them, man. Like, just stop.
Yeah, facts. Though.
I think I only got 2 players that played before 1980 to be in my top 10, and that is Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and that is it.
And Kareem played in like the 80s a lot too, so it's like
Kareem dominated in the 80s.
I give Wilt his respect. I give the Big O his respect. I give Jerry West his respect. But you're not gonna sit here and tell me Bob Cousy was shit, bro. Like, no. Dolph Shays, like, come on, man. Like, these are dudes that didn't shoot 40%. Like, that's insane.
Bill Sharman.
like
that still makes me so mad.
People, man? Like, come on, bro.
Listen, with the evolution of the sport, like, I'm sorry, the original 50 are not all still top. There's probably 10 players on the NBA 75 that are not top 100.
Yeah. Probably not even top 150 if we being honest.
Yeah.
Like, respectfully, if you put CJ McCollum in the 60s,
greatest player ever.
They might have given everybody the work.
They might have kicked him out the league. They would kick him out the league.
Let me say this, bro. If you put like 5 players from the current NBA into the ABA in the 70s, ABA might put the NBA out of business. The NBA might have been merging into them.
Definitely.
100%.
Just a better, more entertaining product, better players. They would be the best players in the world.
Like people with these narratives be killing me. And like that's why I find it hard to like watch other people's podcasts other than Through the Wire, because it just be a lot of like bad takes, hard comparison of players, and just like bad content overall. It's like, I don't know. People just don't appreciate the game a lot, like enough. And I feel like people that are in the content creating space, they feel like they just have to have these hot takes to get any type of traction, which is just not true. Like, if you make good content, people will watch you eventually.
Yeah, facts. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know, like, it's just the natural evolution of any sport. Like, it's not necessarily a basketball thing. Like, you can look back and look at any sport 30, 40, 50 years ago. Like, it's just the evolution of the sport, the evolution of medical facilities, the evolution of training, the evolution of nutrition. Like, it's no knock against players that have played 40, 50 years ago. It's just how it is. Like, you can go back and watch a hockey game from 50 years ago. It looks like you're watching a much slower and much less entertaining game, because that's just the reality of it. Like, that's just the evolution of athletics, the evolution of any given sport. Like, it's no knock against them. It's just the reality of it.
Yeah, anything like in the NBA, like anything pre-90s, I just can't watch. I can't sit down and watch it. I can watch the 90s because it's Jordan and, even like Hakeem's teams, like I can watch them because they're not as modern, but they're closer than, the 80s. It's like you got somebody on the wing backing down their defender while somebody's on the low block posting up. Like, it's disgusting. Like, it's just so nasty to watch, man. Like, nah, I can't. Like, NBA TV always runs reruns of like Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. I just can't watch those teams,
Dang,
man.
you can't watch Showtime?
Nah,
I feel like
I could watch
couldn't
Showtime probably more than the Celtics from the 80s.
I was about to say, I don't think I could go back and watch like an average like 80s game. Like, I could sit down and watch like, I don't know, like Cleveland versus Toronto this year or something, which is just like two like mid-level teams playing against each other. But if y'all watch like two mid-level teams from the 80s play each other, I probably couldn't watch it.
Probably so nasty.
Facts.
But I think, yeah, the 90s especially, there's just a lot of stars, man. I don't know. It's like when you think about the 80s, as like time has progressed, there's only really a couple big stars from the era that you still think about in the modern day and still talk about commonly. Whereas like with the 90s, it goes pretty deep with like Jordan, Pippen, Hakeem, Patrick Ewing, Reggie Miller, like Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. The more you go around the league, it's like there were just names that like people still recognize and talk about in the modern day. And you just don't see that with the older eras.
Most definitely, man. But like Devin said, like evolution is still good. It's a part of anything in life. Like just how like media is evolving. Like now we have, virtual podcasts and stuff and social media and all that. Like things, they evolve and people aren't good. Like the older generations aren't going to be able to agree with it because they grew up a certain way. They watch certain players and they think those certain things like that's law. Like you can't tell old heads like Jordan's not the greatest thing ever. And you can't tell most of our generation that LeBron's not the greatest thing ever. It's just a matter of the fact of evolution, man.
I just wonder who's going to be next. Because I don't. It's crazy because I like they probably thought in 1970 they probably thought we will never see a player like Wilt Chamberlain.
Yeah.
And now it's like then Kareem came along, set all the scoring records, broke pretty much every record he could or cared to. And it's like we will never see a player like Kareem. 6 MVPs, Michael Jordan comes along, it just evolves the conversation. It's like now. Whereas in 1970, like most people, like I don't know. Honestly, it was probably like that, like talent versus accolades debate. But it's like now both of the players who were in GOAT contention at that time are not even like. There's no debate now.
Yeah.
So I just like how it will continue to evolve going forward. I think will be very interesting to see.
Yeah, the next great's probably like in middle school right now, just chilling.
Yeah, facts.
Yeah.
I don't know though, man, because it's like LeBron is compared most heavily to Jordan, and LeBron came into the league right when Jordan retired. So it's like, yeah, maybe we haven't seen the next guy to really get into that conversation. Maybe we've seen somebody that'll get close. I mean, obviously Steph Curry is like a top 10, but I mean, like LeBron hadn't came into the league yet, but you had like Kobe in the league for a while before Jordan retired, per se. And while he's not like a GOAT candidate, he's like obviously in a top 10, like most average people's top 10.
Except for people on NBA TikTok. Just saying.
All those stat nerds that look at analytics.
He shot 44%. He shot 44%. Can't be a top 10 player.
2000 stats are crazy. Like you can't look at any like efficiency stat from the early 2000s, or you would think like that's like the worst era of basketball ever. You'll think every player that played from 2000 to 2005 is terrible.
Yeah, yes. I mean, you just can't compare efficiency stats across eras. Like the game changes, spacing changes. Like you can't compare that. The flow of the game and how the game's played impacts efficiency. Like it's just not comparable, and that goes for most things between eras, but especially efficiency.
I guess it's like that's like right around when like hand checking and stuff changed, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, is that kind of the main reason why like the efficiency was so terrible?
Probably illegal defense too.
Yeah. Legal defense, hand checking, and just as the evolution of the 3-point shot has increased, that has in turn helped 2-point efficiency because there's just more space. Jimmy High Roller's video on that, I don't know when that was. It was sometime during the finals, I think, was an interesting video on that.
Honestly, yeah, the biggest thing I can think of for like the early 2000s in particular might be just because that was when you really started to see moves to like teams really built around guards. I think because of the impact Michael Jordan had, because most of the like big teams in the 90s were still built around like big men, sometimes wings, but rarely were built around guards. Yeah. And so I think as you moved into the 2000s with like Allen Iverson, Kobe, Tracy McGrady, even like Ray Allen with the Bucks, teams like that, like probably going to those guard offenses without really having the evolution of the 3-point shot and things like that. I guess it was just the perfect storm of not efficient offense.
That's another thing. You just brought up Ray Allen. Have y'all been seeing they're trying to compare him and Klay Thompson?
Ray Allen versus Klay. Yeah. Yes.
Bro, there's no comparison. Like, nah. Klay's good, but Ray Allen was when he was the number one option, he was so elite. Like,
yeah, facts.
A game away from the NBA Finals as a first option in year 5. Respectfully, Klay Thompson's not doing
that. On the books. Like, come on now. People are out of their minds, man. I promise you.
People will be thinking about Miami Heat Ray Allen, and that's it.
And Klay will barely
late Celtics Ray Allen. Like, come on now.
Klay will barely ever face a double team in his whole career because he plays with like the greatest spacing of all time. Like Ray Allen's efficiency stats are very close to Klay's efficiency stats, and like we just said, like the least efficient era of ball,
while taking more difficult shots that he had to create for himself.
Like legit, like back in the day, he was like a legit like 3-level type scorer. Like he could do all things. He was a pretty good playmaker, good defender. Like Klay Thompson is a 3. He's the like upper echelon of 3-and-D players. Like that's what Klay Thompson is. And Ray Allen was a legit franchise player in his time.
And it's like we're just talking about like Bucks Ray so far. It's like that's not even his prime. Sonics Ray, that's his prime.
I don't know, man. There's NBA Twitter is just such a bad place. Like there's always just every like few months just a weird debate comes up. Like whether it's this or it's Tony Parker's better than Dame and Russell Westbrook, or I don't know. It's always something, man. And it's just like, who was bored enough to make this up, and how did this gain traction? Because it's just terrible conversations.
Yeah, Klay. It's just the thing with Klay to me is he's always been weird to rank for me. Even I remember like back a couple years ago, like trying to rank him like probably like 2018 era in the top shooting guards with like a Jimmy Butler and like DeMar DeRozan. Like those three for me, it was always so weird because Klay, he's so good at what he does, but for me, he's just like not dynamic enough.
Yeah, Klay plays his role well, but like if he was that number one type option, then he probably gets rated less highly than he does now because he looks better than he would if he was in a Jimmy Butler role, or if he was in a DeMar DeRozan role. And that's nothing against Clay. It's just the nature of what he's good at and what he does well in his role.
And that's what's always made him so weird. Like, he just doesn't seem like the type of guy that can take over and become a first option because of his play style. It's not like it's just a lack of touches because he's next to like a Curry. Like, I think CJ's numbers went up because he wasn't in the backcourt next to Dame anymore. If Clay's not next to Curry, he's not taking over playmaking duties.
He would need so much for him to excel and for the team to be decent. He would need a lot. Like, you'd have to build a team around Klay Thompson, and nobody's doing that shit. Like, come on now.
It's like, yeah, floor raising. He's not a floor raiser to me, like, at all. I think he's a certain, like, top option. He is a crazy ceiling raiser. I don't know if he's a floor raiser.
He's like the perfect, like, Klay Thompson's a role player, but he's an all-star role player. Like, he's like the perfect role player that you would want next to your star. Like, any star in the league would love Klay Thompson next to them. Just so happens Steph Curry got the luxury of playing with Klay Thompson basically his whole career.
I mean, that's how it goes, man. It's like Michael Jordan playing next to Scottie Pippen, bro.
Yeah.
Scottie, he played his role, but he was so amazing at it that – but even Scottie Pippen was like, when Michael Jordan retired the first time, like, that team was nice. If Steph Curry missed a year and Klay was, like, playing, I don't think they're going to the second round like the Bulls did without Jordan.
I think that might be more of a – I'm going to sound like I'm hating on Scottie, which I do kind of be hating on Scottie because he be talking out his ass sometimes. But I think that was a little more Phil Jackson too. Phil Jackson is like one of the goats.
Wasn't B.J. Armstrong an all-star that year?
Yeah, he elevated his play.
That's crazy. Like, the Bulls, Michael Jordan retired and they had an all-star guard. Which could – I know, like, that was an era where, like, fan voting made things crazy. Like, Kobe's first all-star appearance, he should not have been an all-star.
Nah, facts.
Luckily, he ended up becoming something great. But, like, imagine, like, I don't know, a good play, like, somebody that was really good, like, for, like, a year or two and then fizzled out. Imagine they're, like, an all-star starter, and it's like, how did this dude get into an all-star game?
Yeah, Kobe's first 2 years, he was kind of bad. Not even kind of. He was bad.
He just kind of became so great that it's like, oh, he was an all-star that young? That makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. Nobody questions it at all.
That'd be like if Michael Carter Williams was an all-star his first year. Like,
that's when Gabe asked that question, that was the first player that came to my mind.
That was in my head, but I'm like, he kind of already flamed out by year 2. So I'm like, I don't know if I should bring up that.
Maybe like Tyrik Evans.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody like that. I don't know.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of 3 Point Weekly. Be sure to let us know your thoughts on all of the Western Conference offseason moves so far and any predictions you have for where the remaining trade targets and free agents will go, such as DeAndre Ayton and Colin Sexton. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.